just so you know, my name is Rebecca Kilbreath. I'm a writer and editor with degrees in film studies and library science. And I've been collecting Viewmaster for more than 20 years, off and on, pretty on lately. But yeah, today I wanted to talk about, and let me do a quick screen share here. I wanted to talk to you guys about Viewmaster, the history of Viewmaster, but also my history as a collector, and give you guys some of the key content areas that may be of interest to those in the greater stereoscopic community. Now, I'm just going to go ahead and assume that most of you are familiar with Viewmaster because, frankly, they sold more than 1 billion products from the 1940s well into the 2000s. So, for me, I assume that most of average folks out there were introduced to 3D images via Viewmaster. It was a wildly popular format. And so I'm assuming some of this will be a refresher, but hopefully I'll be providing a couple of surprises for you, something interesting. How do I move this forward? There we go. Okay, that's how you do it. I've never done a Zoom PowerPoint before, and I rarely do PowerPoints, and all of this is very overwhelming and exciting. So to jump in, Viewmaster was invented by William Gruber, who was working with Sawyer's Inc. in Portland, Oregon. And back then, Sawyer's was called the Sawyer's Photo Finishing Service and was one of the largest producers of scenic postcards back in the 1920s and 1930s. Okay, so Viewmaster itself was introduced at the 1939 New York World's Fair. And it was just a couple of years after the invention of Kodachrome film. And that's important because Kodachrome was what Viewmaster used until the 1970s. And because of that, obviously the transparencies they use retain incredible color and vibrancy over time, which I think is one of the things that really makes them valuable to collectors. What we're looking at right now is a shot of the Constitution Mall. This is from an early Viewmaster reel. Most of the reels I'll be sharing with you guys today are the images are from my own collection. And just to let you know, this is also the reel that I think this is taken from, or a similar one. It's the New York World's Fair reel. It's a gold foil reel. This is what they look like when they were first introduced. Excuse me. Now, initially, Viewmaster was marketed as this exciting alternative to scenic postcards. The reels were sold at photography shops, gift shops, at scenic attractions. So if you were at the Grand Canyon, you would be able to buy Viewmaster reels of the Grand Canyon. They also were sold via mail order, so you could get whatever reels you wanted. Now, when I first started collecting way back in the 1990s, I found this Model C Viewmaster at an antique mall with some National Park scenic reels, and that's where my collection kicked off. And I think what I liked about it was that, it gave me an opportunity to see these little time capsules, to take a quick little vacation to the past. And the images you see here that I grabbed from some of the reels I have is a woman enjoying a snowy scene in New England, a boat full of people on the water next to the Teton Mountains. There's the Shenandoah Caverns entrance in Virginia, very ornate. And anytime there's a picture of a gift shop, I'm super into that. And then there's also the dunes of Death Valley. And my collection started the same way that Weirdly Enough Viewmaster did, which was postcard shots. But as my interest evolved and my collection grew, so too did the geographic span of the images. And I think one of the neat things about Viewmaster is that they were truly trying to capture images from every corner of the globe they could possibly get to. And this is just a handful of things I've seen recently. It's by no means comprehensive. There's an incredible variety in reels and in places. But we have here a man carving ivory in Hong Kong. And then there's also a man carving a boat in Panama. There's the incredible bullfighter's costume in Mexico. And then there's a woman doing fine filigree silver work in the Yucatan. So I think these are just some basic examples of the kinds of things you can see, but that's certainly not it. There are many communities represented in America. There's the Creole and Gullah communities in the South. And globally, there are entire packets dedicated to places I certainly had never heard of, including the Zuiderzee, which is a lost fishing village in the Netherlands that existed before they built the dams that put that city underwater. And one of the things I like best about Viewmaster is I feel like I learned a lot through it. And I think that that's by design, because one of the big elements of Viewmaster was that William Gruber and the folks at Sawyer's truly believed in this product as an educational tool. There are many examples of education reels over the years, but notably, this is not my photo, by the way, I snagged that from eBay. Notably, the US military purchased something like 100,000 viewers and several million reels. And they included this stereoscopic range estimator kit that you see here that sold recently for $475 on eBay. Educational reels tend to go at a little bit of a premium, and there are a bunch of topics. Other interesting topics include like mushroom identification, flower identification. There's a sweeping history of Chinese art. And there are also a whole series of medical reels dedicated to body dissection, if you're into that kind of thing. It's not my fave, but some people are really into it. I have a couple of them, and they're pretty intense. I think that the education reels also overlap with another area that was a key component of Sawyer's business, which was the manufacturing of commissioned commercial reels. They sold everything, everything from bourbon to toothpaste to farm animals. Among the most desirable commercial reels for collectors, there's one here at the bottom middle, is the movie preview reels were created to promote the 3D movie craze of the 1950s. They were only in movie theaters as a promotional element. You could go look at the image before you saw the movie. And those are pretty desired by collectors because they're just pretty hard to find. I just got lucky and scored one in a lot. And then obviously in the 1950s, that was huge. And 3D in general was really huge in the 1950s. But one key thing that happened that really set Sawyer's and Viewmaster in a certain trajectory was that in 1951, Sawyer's acquired their key competitor called TrueView. And with it, they acquired the Walt Disney Studios licensing. That was 1951. Just a couple of years later, Disneyland would open. And so, that was all she wrote. The partnership was wildly successful, and it spanned many, many, many decades. And I know there are many who just simply collect Viewmaster Disney reels. So that would be enough to keep you busy forever. Another thing that was popular in the 1950s was and I'm sure this is probably of interest to all of you stereoscopic photographers, was the end-to-end service for personal reels. They sold at the time a personal stereo camera, a film cutter, mounting supplies, all of which you can find on eBay. They also had a 3D projector called the Stereomatic 500, which is, the most 50s things you could name something. You could do everything from start to finish yourself at your house, which you'd have to do today, of course. But back then, if you didn't want to make your own reels, the folks at Sawyer's would actually do it for you via mail-in service. And I know that before we started this, someone held up a reel that a company called Image 3D has sort of taken up the mantle of personal reels. It's not Kodachrome, obviously, but it's still a lot of fun. I've made a few personal reels, and it's kind of a hoot. And as the years went by, I think the Viewmaster started to become much more strongly associated with cartoons and pop culture. And that's because in the 1960s, GAF Corporation purchased Viewmaster, and they leaned heavily into that category. Much more heavy on TV shows, movies, kids programming in particular. By the 1970s, however, GAF, because I think it was more focused on children, started doing a lot of cost cutting. I'm assuming sales were starting to go down as well, but they broke away from Kodachrome, which is a real tragedy for me, a person who likes good imagery and photos. They moved into 2 or 3 various lesser film stocks. The worst one was in the late 70s. So a lot of Gen X childhood images are faded on this lesser film stock. You can find the Kodachromes here and there. You have to kind of look for them. Anyway, the leaning into the kids' reels continued because it was sold a couple more times and eventually ended up with Mattel, and it's nestled now under the Fisher-Price brand. They don't do much with it. I think they license it to Big Fun or Basic Fun. That was last I knew. But as someone like myself who, I don't really care about cartoon reels, but I do care about the shared experience that is Viewmaster. I think that part is really cool. I think Viewmaster is literally from everyone's childhood. So there's a nice shared experience, but also there's a real transmissibility. There is the idea that because any reel could show in any viewer from 1939 on, you can share your grandparents' reels with your current viewer. So I think that transmissibility and that shared tactile experience is really profound. I think that that's why many collectors start out acquiring the things they loved and had in childhood. And I think that they, If you were a kid in the 1960s, you can get a monkey set. From the 1970s, you can get 8 is enough. 1980s Knight Rider, the A-Team, all of those things are popular. There's also a lot of major pop culture franchises represented: Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Harry Potter. If you want sci-fi, obviously there's Dune, which we have pictured here, but there's also many, many obscure shows that they thought were going to be hits that have a real cult following among their Viewmaster reels from the 50s and 60s. There's also an entire, track related to space. NASA images, like the space race in general, is represented very heavily in Viewmaster reels. Excuse me, I've never talked this much in my life. So for me, obviously, I said that I was all in on scenic reels, but at some point, as you get older, your Gen X childhood feelings kind of catch up to you. And these are my 3 favorite reels. This is my viewer from when I was a kid. It's a Model L with the nice big orange depression lever, which I love. And I looked at the Electra Woman and Dinah Girl, Batman, and Cinderella reels a million times, easily, at least. And so those have a lot of nostalgia for me and warm feelings. And I enjoy looking at those to this day. In particular, in the Cinderella reel, I think that the diorama reels in particular hold a real special place in the hearts of collectors. And the artwork that was created by Florence Thomas, Joe Liptak, and other sculptors that work for Viewmaster really resonates to this day with people who saw them, but also people who are new to them. I created an Instagram account to share images from my Viewmaster collection last year. And I was really happily surprised to find so many people like, oh, I love this. I had this. The nostalgia factor was very big for those folks on Instagram. But the one thing that people really, really, really respond to are the diorama reels. And I shared this image of Florence Thomas working on this set and The Sword in the Stone. And people went wild for it because I think that they see this context. They see the size of the dioramas. And one other happy sort of interesting thing that happened on Instagram was that so many people who reached out to me to tell me that they were really enjoying what I was sharing were cartoonists, illustrators, puppeteers, painters, all of these people who were like, this is a huge inspiration of my work. You don't understand. I still think about it all the time. So I thought that that was incredible. And I think it's because the sculptors did such incredible work. The diorama reels are well worth seeking out. If you have any interest in stereoscopic photography, which it seems many of you do, the tabletop 3D photography they produced for these reels is, in my opinion, unparalleled. It's some of the greatest stuff I've ever seen. And also the art's incredible. So basically, those are the key content areas and some of the big things that drew me to Viewmaster in particular. But I think it's important to mention, oh, and here's some, I'm sorry, I meant to skip. Here's some more of the reels that have gotten a big, or the images that have gotten a big response. And I think that they're pretty incredible. If only, I'd love to be able to sculpt like that. Anyway, one of the things that I think it's important to mention is that, as the kids like to say, things are problematic. So being Gen X, I'm sort of new to all of the idea of problematic, but I'm learning. And I think having a degree in film studies, I can't help but think about meanings and symbols found in compelling images from the past. What did these images say to the people at the time? Who did they include? And sometimes more importantly, who did they leave out? And I think that this is a really interesting piece of Viewmaster and a real interesting look at our shared culture. I wanted to show you. I think that if you look at this image, this is clearly who the reels are intended for. This is a marketing image that was created by Viewmaster. And I think one of the neat tricks that pop culture does in general, but the Viewmaster certainly is guilty of, is erasure. So the dominant cultural narrative excels at erasing people that maybe they're uncomfortable with at the time. So frankly, Black adult Americans are very much absent from many of the Viewmaster reels, although often children are included. There are some bright spots, and there are some places to see people from all over the world and in every kind of corner of culture. I think that the state tour packets in particular offer a few surprises. They often have people of all races and classes, backgrounds, working regular jobs that were important to the industry. There are also obviously some offensive images, which I'm not going to share with you. There's nothing, at least that I have seen, that was shockingly offensive, but there certainly are some things that may make people feel uncomfortable. So I thought it's important to mention that. Since I've been running this Instagram, I've been a little more aware of that kind of thing. I will say that the reels produced from the factory in Belgium just include these incredible glimpses into places I would never have seen otherwise. So whether it's, making cheese at an abbey in Switzerland in the 1940s or making tea in India in the 1950s, I think the educational components and the desire by the people at Sawyer's to really share images from all over the globe was genuinely sincere. I also find that the farther from home I get in Viewmaster Reels, the more I end up learning. And so for me, that is one of the key elements. It's the thrill of discovery. I love to see places I would otherwise never have seen. And frankly, there's a real special place in my heart for just seeing weird shit in Viewmaster Reels. I love it. I love a good tourist trap. I think those are the delightful. This very mid-century tourist trap stuff is great. I also just really love this picture of cross-dressers at Mardi Gras. There's also some in the Rio Carnival reels. There's something to be said for these decontextualized images of the past. I think these photos hit differently for us now than they would have for folks in the 1940s. There's also just a lot of silly weirdness and certain transgressive things. For example, there are 2 entire commercial reels dedicated to the Hereford Ranch's heifer sale of 1953, which is hilarious to me. Each cow looks exactly the same, and I had no idea that they were all of different cows. Genuinely thought it was a reel of someone's favorite cow. But I guess if you know what you're doing when you're buying livestock, you'd be able to tell the difference. The second image in the column here is from the Paris packet, which is an incredible packet. But this caption for this image is "Tramps live under the bridges of Paris." And for me, I was like, this is fascinating. I don't think they would show anything like that from the United States based on sort of the middle class values of the Viewmaster aesthetic. But the further you get from home, the more interesting it gets sometimes. And I just think that that's a really compelling image. And then there's also a lot of strange packets that were sort of cooked up at the height of their popularity. There's one called FBI Agent, which features this made up kidnapping plot, but it also takes place at the actual FBI headquarters that they got into and took 3D photos of, and also a picture of J. Edgar Hoover in 3D. So it's pretty fascinating. And while the kids' reels are definitely outside my wheelhouse, there are some fun ones to be had. There's some really funny and strange images to be found. I recently discovered this creepy, hilarious Hug-a-Bunch set from 1985-ish. And I'm as terrified as this little girl for sure. But there's also a ton of other things, but I wanted to just say thank you. This is kind of a tip of the iceberg when it comes to Viewmaster and the key content categories. I think one of the best things about Viewmaster for me, at least as a collector, is that as my interest and personality has evolved, so too has my collection. And because the Viewmaster cut such a wide swath through time and pop culture, it continues to speak to me, and my collection continues to evolve with my interests. Anyway, I hope maybe I've sparked some interest in you as well, and I appreciate you letting me share this with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. That was a fabulous presentation.
Thanks.
You did a great job. I know you mentioned, you're a bit nervous, but yeah, that was great. And I won't take up all the questions.
Thank you.
I won't take up question and answer time, but I will say that, yeah, for several reasons, your presentation has touched me. And I would say one as a collector, because, I love collecting and just that whole aspect of learning. Two, just that you mentioned erasure. It is one of the main things that I discovered in starting to collect, and I started collecting TrueView, which is right before Viewmaster.
Yeah.
And, I love looking at the pictures and, the nostalgia, but I'm just like, something's missing here. And so I've started sort of a side project. It's been harder than well, actually, I did expect it to be difficult, but trying to find Black Americans in 3D from the 50s, 60s, 70s. And
it is challenging.
Tough.
Yeah.
So that I love. And then the last thing is on the cows. I actually have several reels of TrueView on the cows.
Oh, that's really funny.
7 years they did that. 7 years. A couple of them are in color.
Oh, that's really funny.
But cows and the exact same.
Is it the cattle sale? The Hereford Ranch cattle sale?
Yes, same thing. The sale.
It's hysterical. When the second I picked up that reel, I was like, I thought it was all the same cow. I'm like, what is this?
They do. They look the same. So I did not realize there were Viewmaster reels on that. Yeah,
there's at least, so I'm assuming they maybe Viewmaster acquired TrueView, and that's how we have the cows in the Viewmaster.
So, all right. So I will turn it over to
Thank you so much.
That has any questions for Rebecca.
There's no good model that is currently manufactured. Model D is the best of the, if someone asked what's the best currently manufactured, there isn't one. The Model D, nice. There you go, David. He's got the Model D right there. I've got the C and the L by me just because I wanted to show them to you guys when I was going through the thing. But yeah, the Model D focusing one is probably the best one, although it's a steeper investment. It just depends on how into it you are and what you want. I think the Model E is fantastic. The Model F is a cheaper internal lit one that's lovely. I mean, I know a lot of people. Honestly, collectors, everybody seems to have their favorite. I tend to use the Model D because it has the largest magnification and it's internally lit. And it also has a focusing feature. And as someone whose eyes are failing her year by year, the focusing just keeps getting dialed up.
I think the important thing about the D is that the image size is almost twice as big as the other models. And as you said, the Model F is the next best one because it's slightly bigger magnification.
Yes.
But it can be found a lot cheaper than a Model D if you can't find one.
Yes, it's much easier to come by.
I'd like to put a plug in for on the Model D, if somebody already has one, is because of the way the light sticks straight into the reflector, the LED replacement bulbs are really fantastic.
Yes, I have those.
Even lighting, and they're really a lot brighter.
Yeah, I agree with you. The LEDs are great.
It's a big
as long as you don't get the LED that's too blue. Sometimes the cheaper LEDs have a real harsh colored.
You could put filters in if that bothers you.
I've honestly, done that before
too. With the LED bulbs, I literally take an orange magic marker.
Oh, that's a great idea.
And it's totally fine.
Fantastic.
Like, you're not going to get it exactly like an incandescent bulb.
Sure.
But I can get it a lot less blue, which is nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Look at all the models.
Very good.
That's great.
Yeah, I love the model.
This is it. This is the key.
Perfect.
Okay.
I've got one. I'm going to do it as soon as we hang up.
I like the Model E because it has glass lenses, which are nice. And when I was shooting Viewmaster with a Viewmaster personal camera in the 80s, I would take like a wedding or something and then give people the reels.
Fun.
And then I would give them a Model E. I bought like a ton of them for like $1 or $2 each. Now it's like, why did I give those away?
Yeah, back in the 80s. Yes.
Yeah. But that
I
was
wish I'd collected in the 80s.
Yeah, that was the viewer I gave away to people because it had glass lenses.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mostly gave away the C because it has glass lenses. It's relatively cheap.
Yeah.
And if the lenses are fogged, you can pop off the retaining rings for the diffusers and clean the insides of the lenses without taking the viewer apart.
I've got a whole bag of Model Cs if anybody needs one. Hit me up.
And the other thing about the Model D, which is a bit of a downside, is it's a 2-element lens in an air-spaced capsule. And over time, film or fogginess builds up on the inner surfaces.
That's true.
And it's easy to clean. And I keep meaning I'm going to do a video one day on my easy way of getting at the lenses without taking the viewer completely
You need to do that right
apart.
now because I've definitely smashed the first one that I had trying to take that thing apart.
Yeah, no, our company was Real 3D Enterprises, and we're the ones who bought all the remaining stock of the Chinese art books, several hundred, and along with it, we got 200 Model D viewers on pedestals. And I had to clean the lenses on every single one before we sent them out because I discovered they were totally fogged from just being in plastic bags for 30 or 40 years or whatever. So I learned in about 15 minutes, I can get the lenses out, clean them, and put it all back together without totally disassembling the entire.
When the Chinese art set was still available as a new thing when I first started collecting in the 90s, and I just couldn't afford it. So one nice thing about Viewmaster, having been relatively poor in most of my youth, not that I'm exactly rolling in it now, but I'm okay. It's a low barrier for entry. It's something that everybody can get a few of. I think that's also one of my favorite things about Viewmaster is people often reach out to me in Instagram and other formats and say, oh, is it really expensive? And I'm like, not for the first 10 years, really. It takes, unless you're just real aggressive. But in general, for me, it was a very great, inexpensive hobby that I could just pick up anywhere at thrift stores. I could, kind of just pick it up at my leisure. And it was just a fun thing to always be on the lookout for. So I collected very casually for a long time.
So I've got a question about the TV and movie tie-in reels.
Sure.
And this is, I don't know if you know this or not, but they did a tie-in reel for the Kung Fu episode El Brujo in the 70s.
Of what show?
Kung Fu.
Oh yeah, I have that one. Yes.
An old favorite of mine.
Sure.
So I picked up the reel and it was great and everything. But what I'm wondering is, why did they pick that episode, which was one of the worst episodes in the entire show's run?
I could not answer that.
Okay.
Oh, is there a tiger in it? I have a theory that whenever there was a tiger on set, they called the Viewmaster people, because every other TV show that had a live large animal is in, for some reason, that episode is the one they picked. So that's my working theory.
Okay.
They were like, we're putting a lot of money into wild animals this week. Let's do that the Viewmaster week.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my only guess.
The other answer is it's probably purely coincidence.
Yes.
On who was available, the timing, and that was the show that was running at the time they could get a photographer there.
Yeah, the Star Trek Omega Glory episode is terrible, and is that the
Viewmaster one, right?
Yeah.
Yes. That's fair. That's probably true for all of them.
Then there's the famous Bonanza one.
There's a very famous, if you don't know, there's a hilarious Bonanza one where everyone in the cast is flipping off the camera quietly, like they all have their hands in their pockets, like pulling this like kind of out. It's very funny.
Well, I've got a funny David Berder story. He's a friend of ours in England, and he shot for Viewmaster in Europe and in England, and he did a number of reels. And he did one reel where he was in the Middle East. I forget which country, but on that set, I think he was in Saudi Arabia. And one of the pictures on a reel was the title was Night Market. But later on, they found the factory found out it was it was actually a drug selling market. So that reel got pulled, and that one picture got changed.
No, wait a minute. You need to tell me what reel that is, because I got to find out if I have that.
I'm gonna have to find out from David Berder which one it is, but depending on
send me in a
which
spiral.
one you got, there's the earlier one that has the drug market, but it doesn't.
Okay.
It just says Night Market.
That is one of the little granular things about collecting Viewmaster. They would run the same reel title for many years, sometimes make little tweaks to it, and they would often swap out images if they had like a better image or a more updated image if it started to look dated. So sometimes, and when I was collecting just single reels, I collected single scenic reels for a really long time. One of the things that became a challenge was like, oh, these are not the same. And you'd have to like, double check and check your duplicates. And there's always surprises with Viewmaster like that. So that's always a fun thing to check for.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you.
Everybody follow her Instagram. It's awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes, please. I know you did have it on your slide, but go ahead.
Could you put an Instagram link in the chat?
Sure, I'll do that. It's
and then lastly, before we quickly move to Gordon, Rebecca, if there's a reel that you just are dying to haven't found yet, go ahead and put it in the chat room if you've got a couple that you just can't find, because this community has been great at finding me viewers, honestly. And so yeah, I'm sure people would love to kind of.
I'm going to put, there's a couple single reels that have been haunting me.
Yes.
I had a whole section on rare reels, but I was like, I can't go on too much longer, but yes. Some collectors really just come in and focus on like getting the hard to find stuff immediately. That was never really my focus, but I've gotten lucky here and there.
Well, if there's anything specifically that you like and you can't find, we can all keep an eye out for you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time and putting together that wonderful presentation.
Thank you. This is so fun.